You know what's funny about modern camping? We pack thousands of dollars worth of gear just to spend a weekend in the woods. Our grandparents, they'd grab a canvas tarp, a coffee pot, and some rope, then disappear into the wilderness for weeks. They didn't have REI catalogs or YouTube tutorials. What they had was knowledge, passed down through generations of hunters, trappers, and homesteaders who understood that survival wasn't about having the right equipment. It was about knowing what to do with what you had. Today, we're diving into 25 camping tricks that kept our ancestors alive and comfortable in conditions that would send most of us running back to our cars. Some of these techniques are thousands of years old. Others were born out of necessity during the Great Depression. All of them work. Tin can stove. Let's start with something that revolutionized backcountry cooking without costing a single penny. The tin can stove turned trash into one of the most efficient portable cooking devices ever created. Your grandfather would save empty coffee cans or those big institutional soup cans from the mess hall. The construction was dead simple, but the physics behind it were brilliant. He'd punch holes around the bottom edge with a church key opener or a nail, spacing them about an inch apart. These holes served as air intakes. Then he'd cut a larger rectangular opening about 2 inches from the top. That was your fuel door. The magic happened in how the design created a natural draft. Cold air got sucked into the bottom holes, fed the fire, and the heat rose through the chimney effect. You could control the temperature by adjusting your fuel. Pine cones for a quick boil. Hardwood twigs for steady heat. The metal can conduct warmth evenly across the bottom, so you weren't dealing with hot spots that burned your beans on one side while leaving them cold on the other. During the Depression, when families were counting every nickel, this meant hot meals on camping trips without buying expensive camp stoves. The real genius was in the fuel efficiency. A handful of twigs that you could gather in 2 minutes would boil a quart of water in under 10 minutes. Compare that to building a full campfire, waiting for it to burn down the coals, then trying to balance a pot on rocks. World War II veterans brought refinements to the design. Some punched extra holes in specific patterns to create a Venturi effect. Others nested multiple cans to create windscreens. The stove weighed nothing, and if it got crushed or lost, you'd just make another one at the next camp. Sand-filled heaters. This heating technique used a thermal mass of sand to create warmth that lasted for hours without continuous fuel burning. The physics was beautiful in its simplicity. Sand holds heat exceptionally well and releases it slowly over time. Your grandfather would take empty cans, fill them with sand, and place them in the hottest part of the campfire. The sand would absorb heat until it reached maximum temperature. Then, using improvised tongs or a forked stick, he'd carefully remove the hot can and transport to where heat was needed. A large coffee can filled with heated sand could maintain useful warmth for 3 to 4 hours. Perfect for replacing at the foot of your bedroll on a cold night. Your feet would stay warm without any fire risk. Different size can serve different purposes. Big institutional size cans from the mess hall worked for major heating needs. Smaller soup cans became hand warmers that you could tuck inside your jacket. Some men wrapped heated cans in old towels or cloth, both for safety and to slow heat release. The cloth insulation made the warmth last even longer. Others built wooden boxes specifically sized for heated cans, creating portable heaters that were safe to place inside tents. Safety awareness was crucial. Touch bare heated metal, and you get serious burns. The cans needed to be handled with thick gloves or tools and placed where they wouldn't be accidentally contacted. Winter logging operations used this technique extensively. When men lived in tent camps at 30 below zero, dozens of heated sand cans would be prepared before bedtime. Strategically placed around sleeping areas, they provided enough warmth for survival through frigid nights. The sand could be reused indefinitely. Same cans and same sand would go through the heating cycle night after night. Eventually cans would rust through or develop holes, but you just save another can and transfer the sand. Some families kept specific sand designated for heaters, believing that certain types held heat better than others. River sand versus beach sand versus construction sand. Each faction had their preference. Puddle water purification. Finding yourself near only murky, sediment-filled water was a genuine survival situation. Your grandfather had a multi-stage process that could turn questionable water into something safe to drink, and it didn't involve any fancy equipment. First stage was settling. Pour your muddy water into a container and let it sit undisturbed for at least an hour. Gravity does most of the work. Heavy particles sink to the bottom. The clearer water at the top gets carefully poured off, leaving the sediment behind. This alone could remove maybe 70% of visible contamination. Second stage was filtration. You'd set up a series of filtering layers using materials found at any campsite. The classic setup used a container with holes punched in the bottom. Layer of coarse gravel first, then finer gravel, then sand, then a piece of cloth. Some men added a layer of crushed charcoal from the campfire between the sand and cloth. Pour your settled water through this filter, and what comes out looks dramatically cleaner. The gravel catches larger particles. Sand catches smaller ones. Charcoal absorbs dissolved impurities and improves taste. The cloth catches anything that made it through. This filtered water looked good, but wasn't safe yet. Not even close. The real killers in bad water are microscopic. Bacteria, parasites, and other pathogens that you can't see. That's where stage 3 came in, and it was non-negotiable. You boiled it. Hard boil for a minimum of 10 minutes. Some men went 15 minutes if the water source looked particularly sketchy. Boiling kills everything. Giardia dies. Dysentery organisms die. Parasites die. The heat doesn't care what pathogen thinks it's tough. During the 1930s, before water purification tablets were widely available, this knowledge saved lives. Hunters who got turned around and had to spend unexpected nights in the woods could survive on Puddle water if they knew the process. The filtering improved taste and removed visible contamination, but that boiling step was what kept you from spending 3 days camped next to a tree with your pants around your ankles. Charcoal smoke for insect control. Chemical bug sprays didn't exist for most of human history, but biting insects definitely did. Your grandfather's solution was smoke, specifically controlled smoke from charcoal and green plant material that drove insects away without fumigating the humans. The setup required a separate small fire pit, usually just a ring of stones a safe distance from the main campfire. You'd burn hardwood down to charcoal, which produced heat without much flame. Then came the secret ingredient, green leaves or damp moss piled on top of those coals. This created thick white smoke that billowed up and spread to the campsite. The smoke contained natural compounds that mosquitoes, black flies, and gnats found intolerable. They wouldn't fly through it. Create enough smoke, and you could make an insect-free zone covering your entire campsite. The balance was everything. Too little smoke, and the bugs just ignored it. Too much smoke, and you'd be coughing and crying along with the insects. Experienced outdoorsmen developed an eye for the right ratio of coals to green material. Certain plants enhanced the effectiveness. Sage bundles added to a smudge fire created smoke that seemed particularly offensive to mosquitoes. Cedar boughs work well. Wild mint if you could find it. In the Pacific Northwest, men swore by Douglas fir needles. The knowledge was regional, passed from native peoples who'd used these techniques for thousands of years. Tribal elders taught settlers which local plants worked best. The smoke served dual purposes in hunting camps. While it kept insects off the hunters, it also helped preserve meat and fish. That same smoke that drove away flies prevented them from laying eggs in fresh-killed game. Hunters would hang meat in the smoke stream for hours, creating a dried outer layer that protected the flesh underneath. Strategic placement of multiple smudge fires could protect a large area, set them upwind of where people would sleep and work, and the smoke would drift through camp. On particularly bad mosquito nights, you might have 4 or 5 smudge pots going, creating overlapping coverage that made the difference between misery and comfort. Natural toilet paper alternatives. This isn't glamorous knowledge, but it's absolutely essential. Your grandfather knew which plants provided safe, effective alternatives to commercial toilet paper without causing infections or rashes. Mullein leaves were legendary, nicknamed nature's toilet paper throughout North America. These large, soft, velvety leaves grew in disturbed soils along trails and clearings. The texture was gentle enough for sensitive skin, but absorbent enough to function properly. Thimbleberry leaves in Pacific Northwest regions offered similar properties. Large maple-shaped leaves with a slightly fuzzy texture that was both soft and functional. Hikers would identify thimbleberry patches and remember their locations. Lamb's ear and meadow regions was another premium option. The common name came from the leaves' resemblance to a lamb's ear, soft and fuzzy. These plants were sometimes cultivated specifically for camping areas. The crucial knowledge involved positive identification and avoiding dangerous plants. Poison ivy, poison oak, and poison sumac could cause severe reactions. Your grandfather taught his children and grandchildren to identify these hazards with absolute certainty before letting them gather anything. Smooth stones in arid regions where suitable plants were scarce became the solution. River stones worn smooth by water worked. You'd use them wet, which was actually more sanitary than it sounds. Ancient peoples used this method for thousands of years. Corn cobs were standard in rural areas well into the 1900s. Rough and uncomfortable by modern standards, but they worked and were readily available around farmsteads. You'd use them dry and folks developed thick skin, so to speak. Moss provided surprisingly good options when properly prepared. You wanted sphagnum moss found in wet areas, not the crusty stuff growing on rocks. The moss was naturally antibacterial and more absorbent than most leaves. Some outdoorsmen would collect and dry moss specifically for camping trips. Snow in winter conditions became emergency toilet paper. Cold but functional, and it melted away leaving no trace. You'd compact it into a mass that had some cohesion, rather than using loose powder. This knowledge wasn't just practical, but potentially life-saving. Using the wrong plants could cause infections that became serious problems in the wilderness far from medical care. Knowing what was safe prevented miserable trips and dangerous situations. Campfire reflector walls. Heat from a campfire radiates in all directions, which means you're only benefiting from maybe a quarter of the warmth you're generating. Your grandfather understood thermodynamics, even if he couldn't explain the physics. He built reflector walls. The principle was simple, but the execution required understanding. You construct a wall of logs, stones, or packed snow 3 or 4 feet behind where people would sit, angled slightly forward toward the fire. This wall captured heat that would otherwise disappear into the night and bounced it back. The effect was dramatic. Same amount of firewood, double the warmth. The angle was critical. Straight vertical didn't work as well. You wanted maybe a 15 to 20 degree forward lean. Too much lean, and you create a chimney effect that actually pulled heat up and away. The right angle created a pocket of warm air that settled around the sitting area. Stone walls worked beautifully because rocks absorbed heat during the evening and continued radiating warmth for hours after the fire died down. You'd wake up at 2 in the morning, and that stone wall was still pushing out heat. Log walls worked immediately, but didn't have the thermal mass to store heat. Snow walls were counterintuitive, but effective. Packed snow is mostly air, and air is an excellent insulator. A well-built snow reflector would bounce heat, without melting, at least not quickly. Some outdoorsmen carried sheets of aluminum specifically for reflector building. A 4x8 sheet of sheet metal weighed a few pounds, but transformed any campfire into a heating system. The metal reflected both radiant heat and light, so you got better illumination too. Professional guides in the Northern Territories built elaborate systems. They'd create a reflector behind the sitting area and another opposite on the far side of the fire. This created a heat envelope that could keep you comfortable at 20 below zero. Add a tarp overhead to trap the warm air, and you had a surprisingly cozy outdoor room. Native American tribes used variations of this technique for thousands of years. Frontier settlers learned from watching them and adapted the methods. By your grandfather's time, it was standard practice for anyone spending cold nights outdoors. Tree-hanging food storage. Bears are smart, persistent, and have an incredible sense of smell. Raccoons are basically furry safecrackers with opposable thumbs. Leave your food on the ground, and you're donating it to the local wildlife. The tree-hang system defeated animals through simple physics. You needed a branch at least 12 feet off the ground and at least 4 feet from the trunk. The height kept it out of reach from the ground. The distance from the trunk prevented bears from climbing up and crawling out to it. The branch needed to be strong enough to support your food bag's weight, but thin enough that a bear couldn't safely climb out on it without risking a fall. The classic technique, use a rope thrown over the branch. Tie your food bag to one end. Hoist it up until it's dangling in space. Then tie off the rope. But experienced campers knew that wasn't quite enough. Smart bears learned they could chew through ropes. The refined method used 2 ropes. Your food bag hangs from a loop between them. Even if a bear chews through one rope, the bag doesn't fall. Some men use a pulley system for heavier loads. Rig a pulley to the branch, and you can easily raise 50 pounds of supplies. Without the mechanical advantage, hauling up a heavy pack was genuine work. Canvas bags treated with pine tar added another layer of protection. The tar smelled mass food odors to some degree, and it made the bag less appealing to chew on. Rodents hated the taste of pine tar. In areas without suitable trees, like above the tree line or in desert environments, food storage got creative. Some cached food between boulders, weighting the top rock so animals couldn't shift it. Others used the permafrost technique learned from Arctic explorers, digging down to frozen ground and burying supplies. Stories of poorly hung food bringing bears into camp became cautionary tales. Every outdoorsman knew someone who'd woken up to a black bear ripping into their pack because they hung it too low or too close to the trunk. Some of those stories ended with abandoned camps and long, hungry hikes back to civilization. Needle compass creation. Getting turned around in the wilderness without a compass could be fatal. Your grandfather could create an emergency compass using a sewing needle and items found in any basic camping kit. The process required magnetizing the needle first. The classic method used silk fabric, though it could work in a pinch. Stroke the needle repeatedly in one direction against the silk 30 or 40 times. This aligned the iron molecules in the needle, creating a weak but functional magnet. Some men carried small permanent magnets from speakers or motors specifically for this purpose. Stroking the needle against a magnet was faster and created stronger magnetization. Magnetic rocks like lodestone could also magnetize needles, though finding one required luck. Once magnetized, the needle needed to float on water to move freely and align with Earth's magnetic field. The traditional method was balancing it on a small piece of cork or a leaf floating in a cup or pot of still water. The magnetized needle would gradually rotate until it pointed north-south. Identifying which end pointed north required either prior knowledge of your general direction or waiting for the sun to provide directional reference. This emergency navigation technique saved countless lost hunters and hikers in the era before GPS or even reliable compasses. The accuracy was surprisingly good. You wouldn't navigate a ship across an ocean with it, but for getting general bearings in the wilderness, it worked. The main limitation was nearby metal interfering with the magnetic field. Belt buckles, knives, watches, even iron-rich rocks could throw off the reading. Experienced outdoorsmen would set up their needle compass away from all metal objects and verify the reading was consistent over several minutes. Some carried pre-magnetized needles wrapped carefully in paper or leather, stored away from other metal items. These maintained their magnetism for months and were ready for immediate use in emergencies. Understanding magnetic declination separated experts from amateurs. True north and magnetic north aren't the same. The difference varies by location, sometimes by many degrees. Knowing your region's declination and accounting for it made the difference between walking towards safety or deeper into trouble. Sand and gravel water filters. Creating safe drinking water from questionable sources required understanding multi-stage filtration principles that your grandfather learned from necessity. The sophisticated filter systems he built used graduated layers of materials to remove progressively smaller particles. Construction started with selecting a container. A hollow log with one end plug worked. Large canvas bags could be adapted. Some men made wooden boxes specifically designed as filters. The key was creating distinct layers that water would pass through sequentially. The bottom layer used coarse gravel, stones about marble-sized. This caught any large particles and supported the layers above. Next came finer gravel, pea-sized stones that filtered out smaller debris. Sand formed the third layer. Clean sand from stream beds worked best. The sand needed to be deep enough, at least 6 inches, to provide meaningful filtration. Too shallow, and water would channel through without proper filtering. The top layer was activated charcoal from hardwood fires. Charcoal absorbed dissolved impurities and improved taste. Some builders added a cloth layer at the very top to pre-filter sediment before water entered the main system. The layer ordering was critical. Water poured in at the top would pass through progressively finer material, ending at the coarse gravel at the bottom where it drained out. Reverse the layers and the filter wouldn't work because fine particles would clog the sand before reaching the gravel. These filters remove visible sediment effectively. Water that went in cloudy came out clear. The charcoal improved taste significantly, removing some dissolved minerals and organic compounds that cause unpleasant flavors. But the filtered water still needed boiling. Filters couldn't remove microscopic pathogens. Bacteria and parasites passed right through even the finest sand. The filtering made water look and taste better, but the boiling made it safe. Pre-packed survival kit filters were sometimes built at home. Pack layers of filter materials in a sock or bag, tie it to your pack, and you had portable filtration. Pour water through into a container, then boil it, and you had safe drinking water from any source. The technique, combined with boiling, made even the muddiest swamp water safe for drinking. Pre-packed survival kits. The original bug-out bag, your grandfather's survival kit, was a masterclass in minimalist preparedness. Everything fit in a tin about the size of a sardine can or a small leather pouch, but the contents could save your life. The item selection was based on decades of collective experience about what actually mattered in emergencies. Waterproof matches came first. Strike anywhere, matches dipped in paraffin wax would light even after being submerged. A dozen matches in a waterproof tin took almost no space, but meant reliable fire. Fishing hooks in various sizes provided food procurement capability. 3 or 4 hooks from small to large covered different fishing situations. Include some leader material, and you could catch fish from any water source. Snare wire for trapping small game rounded out food options. 20 feet of fine brass wire could create multiple snares for rabbits or squirrels. A sharp knife was often worn on the belt rather than packed, but a small razor blade in the kit provided backup cutting capability. Compact and light, but sharp enough for fine work. Basic first aid supplies included adhesive bandages for small cuts, aspirin for pain and fever, and perhaps a small roll of medical tape. Nothing extensive, but enough to handle common injuries. Hard candy provided emergency energy. Sugar-based candies wouldn't spoil and could provide a boost when food ran out. Some men packed bouillon cubes for the same reason. Fishing lines served multiple purposes beyond fishing. Sewing repairs, lashing gear, even emergency dental floss. 20 feet of strong monofilament weighed nothing but solved dozens of problems. A small compass ensured navigation capability. Thumbnail-sized compasses were available that added almost no weight but prevented getting lost. The kit lived permanently in a pack or jacket pocket, completely waterproof and ready for unexpected situations. Day hikes could turn into overnight survival situations if you got turned around or injured. Having this kit meant you could make fire, catch food, navigate, and handle basic injuries. The philosophy was that every item needed to serve multiple purposes. No single-use objects made the cut. The weight and space budget was too limited for anything that didn't pull double duty. These kits literally saved lives. Stories of hunters caught by weather or hikers who got lost always seemed to feature someone who made it through because they carried a survival kit and knew how to use it. Duct tape emergency solutions. Though it didn't exist until World War II when it was developed for the military, duct tape quickly became your grandfather's answer to virtually every camping emergency. The name came from its original use on heating and air conditioning ducts, but outdoorsmen discovered hundreds of applications. Torn tents got patched with duct tape, creating seals that often held better than the original material. Multiple layers could repair significant rips that would otherwise end a camping trip. The tape's cloth backing gave it strength, while the adhesive bonded the tent fabrics even when damp. Broken boot soles that came unglued or wore through could be wrapped with duct tape for emergency repairs that lasted days or weeks. The tape held boots together for long hikes back to civilization when equipment failed far from help. Blister prevention and treatment worked surprisingly well. If you felt a hot spot developing, a strip of duct tape over the area prevented friction better than moleskin. Already have a blister? Tape over it protected it from further damage while you kept hiking. Makeshift cordage came from twisting duct tape into rope that could support substantial weight. Not as strong as proper rope, but available when rope wasn't. A twisted duct tape cord could secure tarps, hang food bags, or lash together broken equipment. Splinting broken tent poles or other gear used duct tape to bind sticks or metal pieces together, creating field repairs that held through the rest of the trip. Some repairs were permanent. The adhesive properties worked in temperature extremes where other solutions failed. Cold weather made many adhesives useless, but duct tape maintained stick in conditions well below freezing. Your grandfather discovered that heating the tape slightly improved adhesion in extreme cold. Some men carried entire rolls, while others wrapped lengths around walking sticks, water bottles, or other gear for easy access. The trick was having it available without adding weight or bulk to your pack. The tape became so essential that checking your duct tape supply before trips was as important as checking food and water. Stories circulated of people whose duct tape ingenuity saved camping trips or even lives in emergency situations. Dryer lint fire starters. This Depression-era innovation transformed worthless household waste into one of the most reliable fire starter materials ever discovered. Dryer lint. The stuff everyone throws away, ignited with just a spark and burned hot enough to light even damp kindling. The preparation happened at home. Save lint from the dryer filter. Pack it into empty toilet paper tubes and seal the ends. These basic starters would burn for 2 or 3 minutes. 4 waterproof versions, melt paraffin wax, and pour over lint packed in egg cartons. 1 fire starter per egg cup. Once the wax cooled, cut apart the individual sections. These wax-soaked starters were nearly magical. They'd ignite in rain, burn for 5 to 10 minutes, and put out enough heat to establish a fire with damp wood. The combination of lint's fine fibers providing surface area and wax's steady burn rate created optimal fire-starting conditions. A starter about the size of an egg could transform a pile of questionable kindling into a roaring fire within minutes. The cost was essentially zero. You were using materials that would otherwise be garbage. Families would make dozens of these fire starters during winter months, building up supplies for the next camping season. Kids helped with the production, learning fire safety and preparedness. The technique spread through camping communities by word of mouth in the 1950s. Outdoors magazines picked it up, and suddenly everyone was saving dryer lint. Some experimented with variations, adding sawdust or cotton batting, but pure lint worked as well as anything. The starters packed efficiently with minimal weight. A dozen wax-soaked lint starters weighed a few ounces, but could start fires for a week-long camping trip, even in challenging weather. Professional guides adopted them as standard equipment. When clients who'd never started a fire in their lives paid for guided trips, having foolproof fire starters meant everyone stayed warm and fed. The reliability factor couldn't be overstated. Match strike flame was the entire process. No coaxing, no careful positioning, just instant reliable fire. Cedar and pine bough bedding. Sleeping on the ground sounds miserable until you understand what your grandfather knew about forest materials. A properly constructed bough bed provided better insulation than most modern foam pads, and the comfort level put cheap air mattresses to shame. Cedar was a premium choice. The natural oils in cedar boughs repel mosquitoes, ticks, and other biting insects. The scent was pleasant enough to help you sleep, but strong enough to create a bug-free zone. The boughs themselves had a springy quality that created genuine cushioning. The technique required knowledge and effort. You'd select fresh boughs from lower branches, cutting them at an angle so the tree could heal properly. Never strip one tree bare. Take a few branches from multiple trees, and the forest wouldn't even notice. The construction went in layers. Your first layer went down with cut ends pointing toward the foot of your sleeping area, and the leafy tops overlapping like shingles pointing up toward your head. This created a drainage system, so if moisture did get underneath, it would channel away from where you were sleeping. Second layer went the same way, but offset from the first, covering any gaps. Third layer if you were expecting a cold night, or staying multiple days. A proper bough bed stood 3 or 4 inches thick. It compressed under your weight, but maintained enough loft to keep you off the frozen ground. In winter, this insulation was the difference between sleep and hypothermia. Cold ground will suck heat out of your body faster than cold air. That layer of evergreen boughs trapped air in thousands of tiny pockets, creating a thermal barrier. Pine worked similarly but required more careful selection. You wanted branches without excessive sap, getting pitch in your hair, and clothes made for a miserable trip. Some varieties of pine had sharper needles than cedar, so you test them by running your hand along a branch. If it felt scratchy, pick a different tree. The aromatic benefits went beyond bug control. There's actual research now showing that compounds in evergreen scent can lower stress and improve sleep quality. Your grandfather didn't need studies to tell him that. He just knew he slept better on cedar than on pine, and better on pine than on oak leaves. Improvised mosquito netting. Spending a summer night in mosquito country without protection is pure torture. Your grandfather created effective barriers using materials that modern campers wouldn't consider. Cheesecloth was a premium option. Loosely woven cotton cloth designed for straining cheese had a mesh that allowed airflow while blocking mosquitoes. Drape it over a frame of branches lashed together, and you had a protected sleeping space. Old bed sheets worked in a pinch. The weave wasn't as tight as purpose-built mosquito netting, but it helped. Some insects got through, but the reduction from hundreds of bites to maybe a dozen made sleep possible. The frames varied by situation. A simple version for solo camping was just 4 sticks pushed into the ground at the corners of your sleeping area with a ridge pole connecting them. Drape the cloth over and tuck the edges under your sleeping bag. More elaborate setups created boxes with fabric on all sides, even the bottom. Lift it slightly off the ground on a platform of branches. Treatment enhanced effectiveness. Cloth soaked in citronella oil dried with the oil embedded in the fibers. Mosquitoes avoided it. Pennyroyal was another plant whose crushed leaves mixed with water created an insect-repelling solution. Paint it on your mosquito netting, and you'd boost protection. The cloth served triple duty on many camping trips. Mosquito barrier at night. Fishing seine in streams during the day, and a stuffed sack for organizing gear during travel. Families often dedicated specific old sheets to camping use, gradually modifying them over years. Add drawstrings at the corners for easier setup. Reinforce weak spots with patches. These became passed-down camping equipment with stories attached. Summer months in northern regions brought mosquito swarms, so thick they could drive a man insane. The old-timers who worked logging camps or trapped for furs knew that proper netting was as essential as food. Without it, you simply couldn't function. The constant whining in your ears, the itching from hundreds of bites, the bloodshot eyes from sleep deprivation, all solved with some repurposed cloth and basic carpentry. Mason jar lanterns. The mason jar lantern proved that the best solutions are often the simplest. A glass jar, some wire, and a candle or oil lamp created reliable lighting that outperformed more expensive alternatives in several ways. Construction took about 5 minutes. Wrap a piece of wire around the neck of the jar, twist it secure, then form a handle. Drop a candle inside or rig an oil-soaked wick. Light it and you had a lantern that was windproof, water-resistant, and surprisingly bright. The glass amplified the flame's light through refraction. What would be a dim candle in open air became enough light to read by or prepare food. The jar protected the flame from wind that would blow out an exposed candle in seconds. In rain, as long as you kept the top covered, you could carry a lit lantern without it going out. Safety was a major advantage. An open flame in the woods is dangerous. Knock over a candle, and you might start a forest fire. The jar contained any accidents. Tip it over, and the flame just went out. No spreading fire. Some men got decorative with it. Punch patterns of holes in a metal lid, and the lantern would project designs on tent walls. Stars, initials, whatever pattern you had the patience to punch. This was entertainment for kids on camping trips before anyone heard of electronics. During the Depression, these lanterns lit thousands of camping trips. Manufactured lanterns cost money nobody had. Mason jars were in every household. Candle stubs could be saved and combined. The jars served multiple purposes too. Store matches and tinder during the day. Protect them from moisture, then use the same jar as a lantern at night. Kerosene versions burned brighter and lasted longer through the night. You'd fill the jar about a quarter full of kerosene, drop in a wick holder made from cork or wood, and you had hours of steady light. The technique required more careful handling since kerosene is volatile, but men who knew what they were doing could make a single jar of fuel last a week. Campfire coffee pot, that blue speckled enamel percolator, sitting on the coals wasn't just making coffee. It was a social center of every morning in the wilderness. The design was pure functional genius. Cold water in the bottom, coffee grounds in a basket at the top, and a hollow tube running through the center. When you set it on hot coals, water at the bottom heated up, expanded, and got forced up through that tube. It sprayed over the grounds, extracted the flavor, and dripped back down to get heated and cycled through again. The perking sound became the wilderness alarm clock. You wake up to that rhythmic bubbling and know someone was already up tending the fire. The timing was an art form. 5 minutes got you brown water. 7 minutes was decent. 9 minutes was perfect. Push it to 12, and you'd have bitter sludge that would wake the dead, but taste like you were licking a chimney. Experienced outdoorsmen could judge it by sound alone. The perking would start slow, speed up as the water heated, then settle into a steady rhythm when it hit the sweet spot. Some added crushed eggshells to the grounds. The shells clarified the coffee, pulling the fine particles down to bottom so you weren't chewing your morning cup. Others swore by a pinch of salt to cut the bitterness. These weren't old wives' tales. The calcium in eggshells actually binds to some of the compounds that make coffee bitter. The pots themselves lasted forever. That enamel work could take direct flame, get dropped on rocks, freeze solid and thaw out, and keep working. Many families still have their grandfather's coffee pot hanging in the cabin. The ritual created community. You didn't just grab coffee and wander off. You sat around the fire, planned a day's hunting or fishing, told stories about previous trips. That percolator kept everyone together for those first crucial minutes of morning when you decided whether to move camp, where to set traps, or which ridge to scout for game. Stick cooking methods. The pointed stick might be the oldest cooking tool in human history, but your grandfather had refined it into a versatile system for preparing different foods with specific techniques. The wood selection mattered more than people realized. Green branches wouldn't burn through during cooking. Look for hardwood like maple, oak, or hickory. Avoid pine and other conifers because the sap could give food an unpleasant taste. Some woods were actually toxic when heated. Oleander would poison anything cooked on it. Knowledge of safe woods was passed down through families. Preparation started with stripping the bark. Bark could harbor bacteria and gave off flavors you didn't want in food. Use your knife to cleanly remove it, revealing the pale wood underneath. The point needed to be sharp enough to pierce food, but not so thin it would break under weight. Different foods required different stick preparation. Hot dogs and marshmallows could go on simple pointed sticks. Fish needed a Y-shaped branch where the fish would nestle in the fork. Bread dough would be spiraled around a thicker stick. Some men carved flat surfaces on sticks for balancing pots. The cooking technique separated beginners from experts. You didn't stick food directly in flames. That just charred the outside while leaving the inside raw. The skill was holding food at the right distance above coals where the radiant heat cooked evenly. Too close and you burned it. Too far and nothing happened. Experienced outdoorsmen could judge the heat zone by how long they could hold their own hand at that height. Rotation mattered especially for meat. You wanted even cooking on all sides, which meant constant slow turning. This was crucial for wild game that might carry parasites. Undercooked wild meat could make you seriously ill. Some sticks became favored tools, saved and reused throughout camping trips. They'd season with smoke and accumulated flavors, develop smooth surfaces from handling. A good cooking stick was personal property, not something you grab someone else's without asking. Teaching kids to cook on sticks was how they learned fire safety and responsibility. They'd start with their own hot dog under close supervision, learning to judge heat and manage rotation. By the time they were teenagers, they could cook a whole fish to perfection. Aluminum foil versatility. That roll of aluminum foil in your grandfather's pack was the ultimate multi-tool of camping supplies. Modern outdoorsmen obsess over gear that serves multiple purposes. Aluminum foil did 20 jobs with a single lightweight item. Need a funnel? Roll foil into a cone. Perfect for transferring liquids or powders without spills. The cone could be temporary for one use or formed tightly and reused multiple times. Disposable cookware came from folding foil into bowl shapes. You could form cups, plates, or cooking vessels that would hold food directly in coals. The foil conducted heat for cooking, but insulated your hands enough to handle the edges. Emergency insulation for feet saved extremities from frostbite. Wrap foil around your feet inside boots, and it reflected body heat back while blocking cold from the ground. This actually worked and was standard practice for winter hunters. Signaling devices for rescue situations exploited foil's reflective properties. A sheet of foil could be seen for miles when angled to catch sunlight. Rescue planes spotted foil signals that would otherwise miss stranded hikers. Fishing lures came from cutting foil into small fish shapes. The flash and flutter attracted fish in streams and lakes. Some men would attach bits of foil to hooks as attractors. Foil wrap cooking was a complete meal system. Wrap fish, vegetables, seasonings in multiple layers of foil, and place the packet directly in coals. Everything cooked together without pots or cleanup. The foil could be reformed for another meal. Multiple layers created surprisingly durable implements. Fold foil over itself 4 or 5 times, and it became stiff enough to work as a spatula or scoop. You could cut it with a knife to create whatever shape was needed. The lightweight nature was critical in the days before ultralight backpacking gear. An entire roll of foil added maybe 4 ounces to a pack, but solved dozens of problems. Your grandfather often saved and refolded clean pieces for reuse. Foil was expensive compared to today, so you didn't waste it. A single sheet might be used for cooking, cleaned, refold, and then used as a signal mirror the next day. Emergency fishing line. When proper fishing tackle wasn't available, your grandfather could create functional fishing lines from materials that most people would never consider. Shoelaces made surprisingly capable fishing line for smaller fish. The cotton or leather laces common in his era had enough strength for panfish and trout. You'd unravel one lace to get longer length, or use it whole for shorter casts. Leather strips handled larger catches. A leather bootlace could land a decent-sized bass or pike without breaking. The material had natural stretch that helped absorb the shock of a fish's run. The inner strands of paracord, though not available until after World War II, revolutionized emergency fishing when it appeared. Pull apart the outer sheath, and you find 7 inner strands. Each strand could serve as light fishing line. Braid several together, and you had lines strong enough for serious fish. Thread pulled from clothing seams caught panfish reliably. You'd sacrifice a hem or seam in spare clothes to get 20 feet of thread. It wasn't strong, but worked for survival fishing when food was necessary. The real challenge was creating complete tackle without modern equipment. Hooks came from safety pins carefully bent into J shapes. The metal was spring steel, strong enough to hold fish. You'd use pliers or rocks to form the bend and sharpen the point on a stone. Thorns from honey locust or hawthorn trees became natural barbs. Pierce them through bait, and they held surprisingly well. Some thorns were so effective that fishermen carried them even when metal hooks were available. Carved bone hooks represented serious survival craftsmanship. You'd take any available bone from game animals, carefully carve a hook shape, and fire harden it. These hooks lasted indefinitely and could land significant fish. Lures came from whatever reflected light. Small bones, bits of foil, even buttons cut from shirts could be fashioned into attractors that fish would strike. These emergency techniques provided crucial protein when camping trips extended unexpectedly. A hunter trapped by weather or a hiker who got turned around could feed themselves if they understood emergency fishing. Many survival stories from the wilderness involve someone making it through because they could improvise tackle and catch fish from whatever water source they found. Branch tongs. Creating tools from the forest itself represented fundamental wilderness skill. Branch tongs were deceptively simple, but required understanding with properties to work correctly. The technique started with selecting the right branch. You wanted green wood, living branches that still had flexibility. Hardwoods like maple, ash, or birch provided ideal properties. The branch should be about thumb thickness, maybe 18 inches long and relatively straight. The construction required a single cut. Using your knife, split the branch lengthwise down the middle, but stop halfway. Don't split it all the way through. The unsplit bottom section became the handle. The two split sections became the tongs. The natural flexibility of green would provide its spring action. Squeeze the handle and the split ends close together. Release and they sprang apart. Perfect for gripping hot cookware, adjusting burning logs, or handling coals. With selection separated functional tongs from useless sticks. Softwoods like pine lacked the necessary spring. They'd either snap when bent or stay squeezed instead of springing back. Hardwoods had the right combination of flexibility and strength. Some woods worked better than others. Ash was legendary for tool handles because of its flexibility and strength. Maple ran a close second. Oak would work but was stiffer. The split needed to extend far enough to provide flexibility, but not so far that the tongs would break apart. About half the total length was a general rule. Experienced woodsmen could judge this by feel. The bark was usually left on for grip and to protect hands from heat. These tongs lasted several days of heavy use before drying out and becoming brittle. The wood would lose moisture, the spring action would fade, and eventually they'd snap. No problem. Make a new pair. The whole process took maybe 3 minutes. Making tongs became a camp arrival ritual. One of the first tasks after setting up was cutting a good branch and splitting it for tongs. Everyone would make their own pair. Kids learned knife skills under supervision, starting with basic projects like tongs before moving to more complex carving. Branch frame shelters. Using nothing but forest materials and basic lashing, your grandfather could construct shelter frames that range from simple overnight protection to elaborate multi-room structures. The A-frame design was most common because it shed rain effectively and distributed weight evenly. The construction started with selecting poles. Look for straight, strong branches about wrist thickness. Dead standing was ideal, already dried so it wouldn't shrink or warp. The ridge pole, the main horizontal piece at the peak, needed to be longest and strongest. This bore the most load. It would span between two trees or rest on fork support poles driven into the ground. The angled side poles leaned against the ridge pole, running from ground to peak. The spacing depended on how you'd cover the frame. Tarps needed fewer poles. Natural materials like bark or boughs required close spacing for support. Lashing techniques created joints stronger than nails in some ways. The square lashing wrapped cordage around both poles in a pattern that cinched tighter under load. A properly tied square lashing wouldn't slip, even when the structure was subjected to wind and weight. Some men used natural materials for lashing. Inner bark from certain trees could be split into strong strips. Vines like grapevine provided ready-made cordage. These natural lashings worked, but required more skill to tie securely than modern rope. The knowledge included understanding which trees provided the best materials without damaging forest ecology. Never cut living trees when dead would serve the purpose. Take from multiple trees rather than stripping one area. These practices maintained the forest while providing needed materials. Elaborate structure for longer stays included separate sleeping areas, cooking shelters, and storage sections. Professional trappers and hunters who spent entire seasons in the wilderness built log cabin-style frames that stood for years. The basic principles remained the same, whether building a simple overnight shelter or a semi-permanent camp. Understanding load distribution, proper bracing, and structural reinforcement distinguish crude shelters from solid construction. Waterproofing compounds. Before modern waterproofing sprays, your grandfather protected leather and canvas using compounds mixed from natural materials that actually work better than many modern products. The classic formula mixed melted beeswax with animal fat, typically bear fat in regions where bears were hunted. The ratio varied by intended use. More wax created stiffer waterproofing better for canvas tarps. More fat kept leather supple while still repelling water. The preparation required melting both ingredients together over low heat. Too much heat would scorch the mixture and ruin its properties. The goal was just barely liquid enough to work into materials. Application was labor-intensive. You'd warm the leather boots or canvas gear, then work the warm compound thoroughly into every fiber. The heat helped the mixture penetrate deep into the material rather than just coating the surface. For boots, you'd pay special attention to seams where water usually penetrated first. Work the compound into stitching holes until it filled all gaps. The treatment transformed ordinary canvas into nearly waterproof material. Water would beat up and run off rather than soaking through. The compounds also preserved leather, dramatically extending boot life. Untreated leather dried out, cracked, and failed within a season or two of hard use. Properly treated boots lasted for years. Regional variations used locally available materials. Coastal areas used seal oil, which had natural waterproofing properties. Plains regions used buffalo tallow. The principle remained the same even as specific ingredients changed. Pine pitch mixed with charcoal created another waterproofing compound, especially popular in northern forests where pine was abundant. The pitch was collected from damaged trees where sap oozed out. Heat it until liquid. Add crushed charcoal for color and to adjust consistency. Then apply like the wax-fat mixture. This pine pitch compound had the advantage of also providing some insect repellent properties. The pitch scent kept bugs away to some degree. The treatments needed reapplication periodically. Heavy use, especially in wet conditions, would wear away the waterproofing. Your grandfather would retreat his boots and gear at the start of each camping season, and again mid-season if needed. Improvised tarp shelters. Modern campers panic if they forget a tent pole. Your grandfather would look at them like they'd lost their minds. A quality canvas tarp and 50 feet of rope could become a dozen different shelter configurations, each suited to specific weather conditions. The basic A-frame was the foundation. String a ridge line between two trees at about shoulder height. Drape your tarp over it so the edges reach the ground on both sides. Stake out the four corners, making sure you've got the tarp pulled tight enough to shed rain, but not so tight it'll rip in wind. That's your starting point. But the real skill came in reading the weather and the terrain. Wind coming from the west? You'd set up your A-frame running north to south. Close off the west end with the extra tarp material, and you've got a wind break. Rain expected? You'd lower one side almost to the ground and stake the high side at an angle to create maximum runoff. Cold night ahead? Set up near a rock face that's been soaking up sun all day, and that thermal mass will radiate heat back into your shelter. The knots mattered more than people realized. A taut line hitch on your stake lines meant you could adjust tension as the rope stretched or dried. Bowlines on your ridge line wouldn't slip even when soaked. Veterans of the logging camps, where men lived in the woods for months at a stretch, developed elaborate systems. They'd use multiple tarps to create entrance rooms, cooking areas, and sleeping quarters. A good tarp camp stayed warmer than most tents because canvas breathed. Condensation that plagued early nylon tents just didn't happen. Your breath and body moisture passed right through the weave instead of dripping back on you at 3 a.m. Campfire Dutch oven cooking. The Dutch oven represented the pinnacle of campfire cooking technology, capable of baking bread, roasting meat, and preparing dishes that seemed impossible in the wilderness. Your grandfather's cast iron Dutch oven was specifically designed for camping with 3 short legs and a rimmed lid. The genius was in heat management. Place the pot on a bed of coals, so heat came from below. Add more coals on top of the rimmed lid for heat from above. This created an oven effect with temperature control based on coal distribution. Understanding the ratio of bottom to top coals separated good Dutch oven cooks from masters. For baking bread or biscuits, you wanted more heat on top. A typical ratio was 1 part bottom coals to 3 parts top coals. For roasting meat, you'd flip that to 3 parts bottom and 1 part top for searing and browning. Simmer dishes used low heat, evenly distributed. The coal count method provided precision. Experienced cooks counted exact numbers of coals for different recipes. A 12-inch Dutch oven baking cornbread might use 8 coals underneath and 16 on top. The same oven roasting a chicken used 12 underneath and 8 on top. These specific counts got passed down through families with recipes. The moisture retention in Dutch ovens produced incredibly juicy dishes. The heavy lid sealed in steam, basting meat continuously while it cooked. A tough cut of game that would be inedible if fried became fork tender after slow cooking in a Dutch oven. Cleanup was easier than expected. Season the pot properly with oil baked into the pores of the cast iron, and food wouldn't stick. After cooking, you wipe it out while warm, and that was often sufficient. Never use soap on cast iron because it strips the seasoning. These ovens lasted generations with proper care. Many families still use their grandfather's Dutch oven, the iron-worn smooth from decades of use. The seasoning so perfect that nothing sticks. The weight was the only drawback. A 12-inch Dutch oven weighs around 20 pounds empty. Car camping made this irrelevant, but backpackers couldn't carry them. For base camps and vehicle-accessible sites, Dutch ovens created civilized meals in primitive conditions. Log canoe construction. Building a functional watercraft from a log represented the pinnacle of wilderness self-sufficiency. Your grandfather's generation included men who could take a fallen tree and, over several days of careful work, create a canoe that would carry people and supplies across water. The process started with tree selection. Cedar was preferred for its workability, straight grain, and natural buoyancy. The wood was soft enough to work with hand tools, but strong enough to handle use. Pine could work, but was heavier. Hardwoods like oak made nearly indestructible canoes, but required tremendous effort to shape. Size mattered based on intended use. A log 3 feet in diameter and 12 feet long would create a 2-person canoe, smaller for a solo craft, larger for cargo hauling. The log needed to be relatively straight, without major branches or rot. The traditional technique used controlled burning. Build a fire on top of the log in the area you wanted to hollow out. Let it burn until the wood charred, then scrape away the charcoal. Repeat this cycle, gradually burning deeper into the log. The char would scrape away easily with simple tools. Control came from dampening areas you didn't want to burn, protecting the walls and ends while concentrating heat in the interior. This required constant attention over hours or days. More modern approaches use axes and adzes to chop and shape. Hard work, but faster than burning, if you had sharp tools and strong backs. The interior would be roughed out with an axe, then refined with adze to create smooth surfaces. Wall thickness was critical. Too thick, and the canoe was too heavy to carry or paddle efficiently. Too thin, and it would crack or sink. Experienced builders aimed for about 1.5 inches, thicker near the gunnels where stress concentrated. Shaping the exterior refined the hull form. A flat bottom created stability, but dragged in water. Slight V-shape improved tracking and speed. Rounding the ends helped it cut through waves. These refinements separated crude boats from actual canoes. The finished product wasn't pretty by modern standards, but it functioned. These canoes crossed rivers, moved supplies to remote camps, and provided fishing platforms. Some lasted for years of hard use. The knowledge came from Native American techniques observed and adapted by settlers. By your grandfather's time, few possessed this skill, but those who did were invaluable on any wilderness expedition. So there you have it. 25 tricks that kept our grandparents alive and comfortable in conditions that would send most modern campers running for their cars. The remarkable thing is how much of this knowledge has been lost. We've traded it for expensive gear and electronic gadgets. There's nothing wrong with modern equipment, but understanding these old techniques gives you options. When batteries die and zippers break, these skills still work. They worked 100 years ago, and they'll work 100 years from now. Which of these tricks surprise you the most? Have you tried any of them yourself? Drop a comment and let me know. If you got value from this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We've got more forgotten knowledge to share. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.